All right, the introduction of color photography. Um, I think that, when I think of color photography, I think, I don't know, 1960s is what I originally thought. Though when I was in undergraduate school, someone actually showed me some footage of when photographers or maybe videographers in Japan went out and did color film footage post Nagasaki after the bombings in World War II. And I was shocked to see color footage from World War II era. So then I thought, oh, well, 1940, early 1940s is probably when color photography starts. I'm going to tell you it's so much earlier than that. Maybe you think 1900 as being really early. It goes back to 1855, right, not very long after the birth of photography, is when we see people beginning to try and figure out color photography. Um, it's not surprising that people were making some attempts at mimicking what the human eye does. There was this guy, James Clerk Maxwell, who in 1855 demonstrated and in 1861 began to get results of his method. And his method, what it did is it mimicked this idea of like our eyes sense red, green, and blue. And with this, and right, like your computer monitor is an RGB monitor, and it is using red, green, blue to give information to those red, green, blue rods and cones that are in the back of your eye receiving light. So they knew how eyes worked at this point. They knew that red, green, and blue were significant to each other, and this guy came up with this method, and it was really popularized by a Russian, and I'll have some examples of that. This guy, Prokudin Gorsky, who was photographing using the method. But this method, in this attempt to mimic how the human eye works, they photographed one picture using a different filter. One would be taken using a red filter. Another photograph, and I want to say this is black and white film, so it's not color film. It's black and white film shot through a red filter, another one shot through a green filter, and a third one shot through a blue filter. When they were combined in the end so that developed film with red, green, and blue filters, the result was a color photograph. Not a perfect system, right? It requires you to take 3 unique photographs and stack them up with filters. And the other thing was, now you have this very thick, dense thing, and you couldn't look at it the way you would look at, say, a printed photograph. So it had to be projected. Light had to come through it to your eye for you to actually see the color. But a really brilliant kind of method of doing this. Here's another slide, a little bit to describe this. Those rods and cones, those receptors in your eye. I don't know. I had a couple of those in there. So I'm going to show you. So this is one example by this Sergei Produkin Gorsky. I'm sure I'm butchering the name, but bear with me a little bit. Grant me a little leeway here since I'm not Russian. The colors are incredibly accurate and incredibly vibrant. So typically what would happen is these photographs would be made, and the sitter, of course, being 3 photographs, right? We kind of talked before about how time had been sped up. You could make photographs in a quick instant. As we saw with Muybridge, with Eakins, with some other photographers. So here we're almost like going backwards into having these sitters sit for very long periods of time, or maybe doing landscape stuff. Here's another example here as well. I'm sorry, take that back. That's autochrome Lumiere. We'll get into that in a second. So bear with me 1 second, and I'm going to launch another slideshow here that's not connected to this one, so you can see some of these resulting images.